Hello, welcome to the Advanced TESOL Skills course, Introduction to Mastering Error Correction. Okay, I won't spend too long. This is not about me. However, my name is Jeanette Barsdale. How long have I been teaching? Way too long. I said I'd get out when I was bored, and I've never got bored so far. I have all the qualifications, CELTA, Delta, Iddleton. I've been a TKT examiner. I've examined for Cambridge for proficiency and CAE and also for Anglia exams, all sorts. More importantly, I've been a Cambridge CELTA trainer, and that is I taught people how to become teachers on the initial 1-month courses, but I also did their extension young learner courses, and I've also trained far more experienced teachers from really all over the world. As part of that work, I also was a qualified or accepted trainer. I trained the trainers who taught those courses. So I'm very, very interested in the service to more experienced teachers. Okay, my intentions, yep, they're good. My intention is I recognise that being a language teacher is hard work. If we're not in front of the classroom, we're planning lessons in our head, we're talking about it with our friends. Teachers work really, really hard, and they don't always get the recognition they need. My mission is to make your life easier. I think that if you feel more confident, if you have more knowledge, you have more skill, your confidence will increase, you'll get better feedback, and your life therefore will be a lot easier. Okay, so the course benefits, you're going to keep your students longer. So you're going to get improved feedback, which is always good. That always helps teachers to feel more comfortable. But improved feedback also feeds into retention. Higher rates of pay, you can push your rates up if you can keep the students for longer. You're going to get more job opportunities. If you're in a position to keep your own students but also support other teachers, you can have more choice as to which direction you go in this industry. Okay. We've written this assuming you're an experienced teacher. There's lots of practical information and tips. Hands-on practice tasks, which will show you how we do as well. There are lots of handouts, summative handouts, so you don't need to take too many notes unless there's a point at which, and we will let you know if you have to. The main focus of a lot of the course is on spoken error. However, there is a large section as well on written errors using, first part is AI, and then the more traditional methods of dealing with written errors. And each section has a teacher trainer tips where we look at the information from the perspective of a trainer. What problems would a newer or less experienced teacher have, and what can you do in order to solve those problems? Okay, so enjoy your Mastering Error Correction course. In this section, I want to look at 3 ways to use and to look at text: TAVI, TALO and TASP. I hope by the end of this, those 3 definitions will become really clear. Okay, so before we start, can you reflect on what do you use text for in your classroom? And how do you feel about using text in the classroom? When you've finished, come back and we'll compare ideas. So, text, it carries ideas, it carries information. We read for the pleasure of the ideas, or we read to get specific information, but the words together create ideas or information. So the words together are the language. I think it's a bit like a train, a freight train. The freight is the ideas, but the carrying body is the language. And we could say that the springboard to other tasks is the destination, that when we use the task or the text to achieve other things. So a little bit more detail. we have a very short text, I love you. So if we look at this for information, generally it means I feel very positively about you. The exclamation may mean that I'm a bit surprised by that and that this is a nice thing to hear. It may not mean that if we know more about the context, but at face value, generally we expect it to mean something positive. The language of it is subject, verb, object. We start with a capital letter, we finish with an exclamation mark, which signals that it's a complete utterance. So there's a specific word order, there's a specific punctuation set to it. If we wanted to use it as a springboard for other activities, then we could say this is the final line in a play or a joke, or I want you to build this into a dialogue between two people. So we could extend it in that way. So that very short text, 3 possible ways to look at it. And to break those down, those 3 ways a little bit more. TAVI. That's very familiar to us. This is what course books do. They present a text, we have some kind of activation, then there's the main idea or the gist task, so we check to see if students understand the text globally. We may then look for inference or have detailed comprehension questions. We ask students to skim, we ask students to scan, and we have all sorts of different task types, generally sort of labelled comprehension questions, but it may be matching headings to paragraphs, it may be a summary, but generally we are testing the student's comprehension of the ideas within the text, which is a TAVI. TALO, text as a linguistic object. So we use text, this is when we use text for language development. So we look at the text structure, where are the verbs, what's the word order, how is it punctuated, what function are the discourse markers, what genre is this, how do we know what genre markers are there that show that this is a recipe or a horoscope or an FT index reading. What language indicates the register? So we're looking at the sort of deeper meaning here. So what words indicate that this is very polite? Words or structures? Okay. Then we have the task text as a springboard for production. Just to be clear, TAVI versus task. TAVI is when we check the ideas within the text. Task is when we take the ideas out of the text and use it to produce a new activity. The task will build on the ideas within the text and ideally build on the language used in the text. Discussions and debates are perfect examples of tasks. Okay, so can you download the worksheet to test your understanding and challenge your skills? The answers are on the last page and I'm sure you'll be fabulous at it. Come back when you're ready. Inexperienced teachers have horrible time understanding the difference between TAVI and TALO and task. Task not so much, it's more about TAVI and TALO. So for example, we often see new teachers put a text in front of students and say, underline the verbs before they have had a chance to understand what the text is about, to read it or anything. So the first task is a linguistic task without comprehension, and it doesn't really work. I would go back and say that task, inexperienced teachers have a hard time linking task activities to the language or the ideas in the text. They kind of tend to jump from the text to the activity and not make it clear to students that there's a very strong connection. Sequence, generally it's TAVI, TALO, TASP. However, higher levels may reduce the TAVI. The text might be short. They may have done it before. It may be a very specific genre. It's not always necessary, but it's usual. Solutions. Give your trainee teachers the task that you've just done. Get them to mark TAVI, TALO and TASP on their own lessons. Give them lots of activities from the course book and see if they can work out which is which. Okay. So those three, TAVI, TALO and TASP, 3 ways to approach text, all very useful. They can be done in sequence and they help to exploit text fully and usefully. Okay, in this segment I want to look at the stages of error correction, or the process, from the point that you hear the student make the error. Okay. So my first question for you is, what is your criteria for deciding to deal with an error or not? You hear the learner make an error. What's your criteria for dealing? Make a few notes and then see if you agree with our decisions. Okay, so for me, to address or not, it will come down to the lesson focus. Is this the target language? In which case, yes, I will correct it. What's the lesson around? Is it the vocabulary connected to the theme? Probably I'll correct it. If it's something completely off left field, I won't touch it. Time. How long will it take me to correct? How complex is the error? Is it the type of error I can correct with a quick hand gesture, with no oral intervention, or is it going to take a long time? And how will that disrupt the activity the students are on at this point? Embarrassment. My rule is, don't let the students go out of the classroom unaware of something they said that may cause them embarrassment outside. That's quite often pronunciation mistakes, for example, LR with Asian students, PB, word confusion could be a problem for Arabic students. The Vietnamese student who's sitting in the chicken as opposed to the kitchen. So yeah, I let students be aware if they've made an embarrassing error or an error that would cause them embarrassment. You know your students. You know how sensitive or not that they are to correction, how much they've already had, and if it'll upset them or if they want it. And also whether the task is accuracy or fluency. The general rule is, in fluency, don't correct, because it interrupts the flow. However, with accuracy, yes, definitely correct, especially on the target language. Okay, so I hope we agreed with each other there. Yeah. When to deal? Well, essentially there's 2 times. There's immediately, almost as the student makes it, and then there's afterwards the cold correction. Now, cold correction can be at the end of the activity, at a later point in the lesson, at the end of the lesson, as a kind of summary. It can also be carried over. Sometimes I send a list of errors to be corrected to the students before the next lesson, or I make up a worksheet and I use it as a kind of revision task at some point in the future. So I do use them, and I find cold correction. So cold correction is quite good for errors that need analysis, so students can sit and work it out. Hot correction is often just to deal with slips and minor errors. Okay, who deals? Okay, so obviously the learner can, if you indicate the error, the learner can self-correct. That's ideal. We often forget peers. Peers can be a great source of correction, and if you think about it, you double the amount of engagement because you've got the learner and their peer rather than just engaging with the learner. Teacher, think about your own correction. I suspect too many teachers correct and they don't allow for the learner and peer correction because they think it's quicker, but in fact that's not always the case. And there's always AI. we will look at how AI can correct later. Okay, so download and complete the worksheet titled Stages of Correction and come back when you've finished. Okay, how to deal. So we'll look at the techniques in the next segment, but broadly, you have to indicate the error. So, teacher, yesterday I go to the zoo. Yesterday I to the zoo. So I indicate by talking up to the error, I make a sound, I may name it. So yesterday I, past tense, irregular. So I indicate that the student has made an error and ideally where the error is in the utterance. I give them time to self-correct and also to get peers in to correct. Allow more time. Experiment with the amount of time you leave for self-correction. The reason why is because if you're the kind of teacher who jumps in too quickly, students won't bother thinking it through because they know that you're going to answer the question. So hold out for a bit longer, play around with that time frame. Once you've got the correction out, whether it's self, peer, or you've given it, make sure that the student does have a correct model and is aware of what is the correct version. Give them time for some reinforcement if needed, and practice if you want to, if you feel it merits it. Okay. So, if you're working as a train-the-trainer, so use the information sheet that you did, stages of error correction, and create cards. So each card contains one stage, and then get your teachers to place them in an order. There's not necessarily a very fixed order, but they should be able to explain their rationale. Okay? And then ask the question, what should I do if I don't know the grammatical term? So this is basically addressing the teacher's fear. So a lot of teachers don't correct because they're scared they'll be asked a question that they can't answer. So especially new teachers absolutely need strategies for dealing with student questions they don't know the answer to. I think one of the best ones is, well, I would say. So in this situation, I would say, So yesterday I went to the zoo, as opposed to yesterday I go to the zoo. That's fine. It at least gives the student the correct version. It may not explain what the problem was, but knowing what to say, the student can often work it out. You can elicit from peers. Does anybody else know the answer to that? Obviously, does the student know to it? And the other part is, I'll come back to you. I'm not sure. And that's actually okay to say to students, I'll come back to you, but remember to do it. So I find even at very advanced, well, maybe more advanced levels, I'm often thinking, why do we do that? And I say, I'll come back to you. And I try and to do the research. Students appreciate it. They don't expect us to know everything. So the main thing is, don't lose your confidence. No, even very experienced teachers don't know everything. And it's okay to say, I want to think about it. Okay. So download the progress and complete the progress test worksheet to assess your current level. If there's any queries, go back through the material. All right. So basically, with the process of correction, just be constructive and positive. Yeah? And keep practicing, really. Okay, in this segment, we're going to look at the techniques you can use to help a student identify the error. And let's have a look. Okay, before we start, can you reflect on your own teaching practice? What techniques do you usually use to correct your students' spoken errors? So apart from repeating the correct version, what else do you do? So break it down in your mind. What things do you do to correct your students? So you can download this worksheet, but I thought so I'm trying to, these are ways that I correct high frequency errors. So for example, the preposition for. So I'm trying to do it non-verbally. So I might just go for to the student, which seems very silly. But in the beginning, if you say for and they look at you and you say for, F-O-R, and you make the connection, so you've then codified that this represents the preposition for, obviously, to and by. All a bit silly, but it works. With or contractions. If I want them to shorten the word, maybe take off the ing, I will make it smaller, or with something, yeah? And then we can use prepositions on and at work. So I'm often walking around the class on, in, be careful with. Word order, so you may just do this. It shows that you want the word to change the word order. S, third person S, just draw it. Okay. Stop at this point would be like a karate chop. And that's saying, often like, don't use the continuous form to stop at the infinitive. Tenses would be hand flicked over the shoulder would be the past tense. Rolling motion is probably keep it going, you're missing something, or it needs to be a continuous or progressive form. You've got one too many words, so take out a word. So you can do this with the finger down. Okay, so those help understand. Those help you to signal to students without interrupting the flow, and it's all done by hand. You do need to do learner training at the beginning to show what they mean, but very quickly students catch on. Okay. So metalinguistic feedback can be sounds, so you can talk up to the error. So yesterday I beep. So the beep indicates where the error is. You can use the physical. Yesterday I past tense. You're also naming it, and like I say, you're talking up to the error. Give as much information. Sometimes new teachers drip feed in and they turn error correction into a kind of guess what I'm thinking game. Throw as much as you can at it as fast as you can. Indicate, name, make a sound, demonstrate with your hand the type of error. Codify. So start by, you do need to train your students to use whatever system you're going to work that works for you. So I spent usually the first lesson, by, which is sort of a bit silly, but they do get it and they get the humour as well. So maximise the message. Don't drip feed in error correction information. Give it as much as you can at the same time. Recast. If they don't get it, tell them. There's no, I see teachers struggling and they're torturing the student to get this, and it becomes guess what the answer is. The idea with metalinguistic feedback is that the student self-corrects or their peer corrects very quickly. It's not meant or intended to be a torturous process. If they don't know, recast and tell them. Be very explicit and accurate. There's a very odd phenomenon where teachers indicate an error, but they don't actually correct the student. Or if the student self-corrects, be clear to them if they've got it right or not. Has the student got it right? Are they being accurate? It's very odd, but a lot of teachers, the student corrects themselves, but they're still not sure because the teacher hasn't said correct. So be explicit. Okay, so download and complete the worksheet titled Matching Spoken Errors to Correction Techniques. So what kind of technique is ideal or best for which error correction, which correction? Okay. Teacher trainer. Trainee teachers need practice, and experienced ones do too if they're expanding their repertoire. So put them in pairs, give one of them a list of common learner errors, and so one plays the student, one's a teacher, the student makes the error and the teacher corrects. Okay, and get them to give each other feedback on how many clues did they give? Did they give a sound? Did they name it? Did they indicate where? Okay. Now download the progress test, see how you're doing. If you're struggling, go back over some of the material in this segment. Okay, so error correction is just do it. Students love it. This is practice task 2, and the idea is to give you more practice identifying the error and deciding how to deal with the error on the spot, assuming that this is a spoken error. Okay, a quick reminder. First of all, try and name the error. So remember, we try to multi-inform in a way. We try to let them give as many clues as we can to the student so they can work it out how to improve it. So name the error, talk up to the error. So yesterday past tense. So you never repeat the error. That just reinforces it. Use hand gestures, use your voice, anything that works. Isolate the sounds for pronunciation. We'll look at that in a minute. So your task is to download practice task 2, consider what the grammatical error is, and maybe more importantly, how you would respond to a learner who made this spoken error. You've decided to correct. How would you go about it? Have a think. When you're ready, come back and I'll show you what we would do. So I've actually had this error. It's a pronunciation error. And the student clearly means to say I had 3 fillings. Yeah, I had 3 fillings. Pronunciation is quite interesting. So with this one, obviously the confusion is the I and the longer E. A lot of European languages particularly struggle with this. They replace the I with the longer sound. So I would say to the student, I had 3, that's fine, I. And I would use my hands to show how it's a small, short sound. But if you can, for example, if you were teaching the longer sound, it would be E. And I use my mouth to really emphasize, sort of over-dramatize it, E. And then I. So I had 3 I. Give the student a chance to pull it, and if I can't, I just pull it together, fillings. So all of that happens quite quickly, really. It's quite efficient. But with pronunciation, show and sound where you can the type of error. Okay, so the problem here is the present continuous. Lower levels, they always miss a bit out, whether it's the verb to be or whether it's the ing. So I'd quite say continuous, so why, auxiliary, and if they don't get that, why is. So why is he not? Remember, you're not trying to play guess what I'm thinking as a teacher. You're trying to, for the student, you're trying to elicit it very quickly, assuming that the student knows what it is. And if they don't, just tell them, yeah, and move on. Your aim is not to disturb fluency or the student speaking at any point. So we've got the incorrect verb form here, irregular verbs. And many students know the correct form, they've just forgotten it. So yeah, so I would bring the yesterday, so we know we're in the past. I, irregular, fell down. Okay, so if in doubt, give it. All right. So remember and remind have got a similar root, but they are 2 verbs in English, and it causes confusion because many languages only have the one and they take the different object. So please remind me. So you make a choice. Which one's it going to be? So please show that you want the shorter word. Remind. If they don't get it, just say it, remind, and always enforce the object at the end. Me, remind me. Okay? Or please remember to. So decide which way you're going to go. That's fine. It's just efficient. I like this. Chocolate's made from Swiss people. Okay, so obviously, so the chocolate is incorrect preposition. And you can, if you've done a little bit of learner training beforehand, bye. So, and they'll get it. So, chocolate is made Swiss people. All right. It's a bit silly, but it works. It's non-intrusive. It's quick, efficient. Causative have is definitely an upper intermediate structure because we've got the went or got and then the object and then the past participle. It can be quite, there's 3 parts at least happening here, and students tend to omit one of them when they first come into contact with this. So I went to the barbers and my hair. So I would show, we need to change the word order and we need to put a word in. So I went to the barbers and my hair cut. This is usually it's being presented and they've just made a mistake. And then another way to do this would be to do it through checking meaning. Did you cut your hair or did the barber cut your hair? Yeah. So I cut my hair, great, but the barber, so that way. All right, but we're looking more at sort of without focusing too much on the grammar. Okay. So we've got wrong adjective order, and generally we put the noun, the Volkswagen, at the end. So I would do this as her. Is it her car? Is it an expensive Volkswagen? So her car is an expensive adjective Volkswagen. So you've highlighted where the word is. You could name it and say adjective. Okay. So we've confused the continuous and simple forms of the present perfect. So this is any continuous. I would say I have been sleep, and I use the circular motion to demonstrate keep going. Sleep, and they get it. Sleeping. Remember, it doesn't take long to train your learners to be aware of your systems for correction. So we've actually got a problem here with the negative and the stative verb. I would focus on the stative in this case. You just make a choice. But I didn't, so I would say I didn't go to the party because I didn't. And then state verb, want. Okay. It's a little bit mucky, that one, but that's quite high level, so they should catch on pretty quickly. Okay, let's hide that from you. All right, so this one obviously is a case where you've got an extra word. So you can do this with, you have to remember to do it in the order which they're looking, but we were too tired. So just demonstrate that the word much is superfluous. Don't need it. Okay, so I hope that was useful. You will get in the habit of doing this. It becomes almost second nature very quickly, and students get used to it even faster than you do, and they're kind of looking at their hands in order to self-correct. Just remember, if you throw all the sort of information at them and they don't get it, then they probably may not know it. Just tell them. You can decide whether you're going to focus and make a meal of it later, but at this point, your aim is to not interrupt fluency, however, to highlight the error and let them self-correct. Good luck. Practice makes perfect. Okay, so I've divided correcting students' written work into 2 parts. The second part will be the more sort of traditional ways to mark. But the first part I want to look at AI. There is artificial intelligence. There is no doubt that this is a game changer for language teachers, or for all educators really. It's got a fantastic myriad of uses in the classroom. You may or may not be familiar with it and love it or hate it. I think it's going to be with us very soon. I use it a lot, and the more I use it, the more I like it. So this time I'll be looking at ChatGPT. It's the one that I use, but there are other models, although I suspect that you can do similar things with them. So I've put this letter into ChatGPT. Let's have a look. So, eyewitness account of a crime obviously not perfect. I would say it's quite good intermediate. And I've put it into ChatGPT as a JPEG. All right, so correct this. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to correct it. Okay, so grammar and clarity is corrected. All right, explain reasons for each correction. Okay. So just for example, the first one, woman found after 2 months, woman found after 2 months, months should be a plural because the text refers to a period of 2 months. So it's if you're not very comfortable with your own language awareness, grammar, it's excellent. But it's also picking up, for example, that the student spelt house in the German way rather than the English way. Okay? It's picked up the difference between British English and American English. Missing auxiliaries. And it goes on. So very useful, and it's given you this final version of the text again. Okay, so I'm going to say create a 10-point quiz, a 10-point test on the corrected language. Okay, let's see what happens. So create a 10-point test. Okay. So this time it's created a multiple choice. Very nice. It's also done rewrite the sentence in a different way. All right. So let me try another way to say this. Create a 10-question close test on the text. Let's see what happens. Okay. Oh, I should have put with answers. Now we have a different type of test, closed test. Oh, good. Oh, we've got a closed test, we've got a multiple choice type of test. And you can provide answers to above tests. I should have put that in. Okay. So it gives you the answers very, very easily. Right? So you can create tests on the corrections immediately. Another way to do it, I like to do, is create a 300-word story using the corrected language. Characters in the story are Hitomi and Max. All right. Okay. Oh, we've got the mysterious murder of Mrs. Fletcher. Okay. Now, one of the problems is I haven't asked it to use high frequency language. So you've got to be very careful with these stories because often they can be pitched too high for your students. What I could say is simplify the language in the above story for an pre-intermediate level student. Okay, intermediate. Let's see what happens. So I am kind of making this up as I go along. Here we go. Okay, so the language is much higher frequency language. and it will be much more suitable for lower levels. Okay, but it's still using the corrected language from the original letter. So create 5 comprehension questions on the above text. I mean, we're moving out now from, it's not actually error correction. However, I think it's a very useful thing to, you're trying to exploit the same material over and over in different ways. Okay, so create 5 questions that test inference in the text. So we want to create higher level questions. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, so this is now testing the student's ability to read between the lines, the inferred meaning. And just a little bit of fun is create a play using the text. So we create a play. You can tell it how many people, it could be how many people do you have in the class. In this case, we've got 4 characters. Oh, and it's all in one act. Great fun in the classroom. I mean, and students love learning this sort of stuff and presenting it, etc. So that's just to give you some idea of the different things that you can use AI to do. So basic correction, absolutely no problem at all. However, what's really interesting is the practice activities it can create within seconds after you've corrected the work. So it exploits the new language over and over again. It's a very useful tool. Okay, in this segment I want to look at some of the hot topics of debate in error correction, and also some of the most likely questions that inexperienced teachers may ask you. So before we go on, what I'd like you to do is download the worksheet, Hot Topics in Error Correction, and jot your thoughts down as you go through it. So how would you respond to the statements made on the worksheet? Afterwards, watch a video and compare your ideas with ours. Okay. So I don't correct because I'm afraid the learners will ask me a question I don't know the answer to and will look stupid and they will lose faith in me. So we have talked about this a little bit. It's very, very big, obviously, for new teachers, but it can also become a kind of embedded habit for more experienced teachers. So first step is obviously to start building up grammatical knowledge, names and terms. As you work through a course book, these are often really well labelled, so start noting them, see how things work together, get the teacher to do an online grammar course if no other option. The other thing is, be confident in you are the teacher because you're able to use the language more effectively than the student. So sometimes it's okay to say, well, in that situation, what I would say is, or this sounds better if you say this. You may not be able to state why, but the valuable piece of information is how to say it correctly. Remember to use students and the peers, and also it's okay to say, I'll come back to you on that one, I'll sort it out for you. What can I do about the learner who keeps repeating the same error no matter how often I correct them? Some errors are not going to sort themselves out until the students increase their. So the error may be down here, but the student's level of English may need to go up to there before that particular error sorts itself out. So there does seem to be a learning curve, a linear process to this learning of language. It's not completely linear. It will depend on the student's context, but I would say don't worry about them too much. The only thing to worry about is if they impede the student's meaning, intended meaning. In that case, it's important. But things like third person S, you'll spend half your life correcting them at some levels if you don't just let them go. So focus more, don't get too worried about deeply embedded errors unless you find that they're really holding the student back from moving up a level. But levels are deceptive. Students are never all one level. They're all got some strengths and some weaknesses. So let it go. What's wrong with just telling the learner the correct form? You know what? Sometimes it's fine. Sometimes you just need to move on. The real point is, though, that in terms of memory and learning, we learn when we engage, when we're active in our own learning process. So the problem with just telling the student is you're not maximising the opportunity for engagement. But sometimes it's expedient, don't worry. Don't flog an error when the whole class is waiting or it's easier to move on. Choose your moment. Error corrections are battles, not wars. Okay. This happens. I've had this happen many times. Sometimes it's cultural, but this is the sort of student who is very, very attentive to the learning process as opposed to acquiring language. They're very rational, they're systematic learners. But the problem is that when you're working in a group, you can get too fixed on one person's errors or one person's problems. So in a sense, you have to either say to the learner, look it up later, this is not the time, or I will come back to you after the lesson's finished with this. But really, you have to just keep these people moving. So you can say, what the explanation you need is not appropriate to this stage of the level. We'll come back to it. Pronunciation. How can I correct pronunciation errors? Make the sound. For example, the VW that Germans have, make the sound V, but also notice that what you're doing with your mouth, V, exaggerate it slightly so that when the student starts to make the same repeated errors again, just Germans always think I look most weird, but V or P, B. So with the Arab students, I would do B and P. So I would also codify the error so they know that what I'm hearing is the B and what they intend is the P. But basically just E for longer sounds. So a lot of students have a problem with the extended English E sound. Make the sound, exaggerate it, so that in the end you don't even need to make the sound, you just E. And you'll notice that I'm also using my hands to demonstrate what I'm doing with the sound, which is to stretch it out, or it may be to make it shorter, the I sound, I. So demonstrate as much as you can, but isolate the sound, show how you're making it to the student, and show them where in the word or the sentence they need to correct. And this is a little bit like the other learner who wants a lengthy explanations. This happens a lot. Part of it is learner training. So you can say, communication isn't perfect. Even native speakers, when they're talking to each other in any language, are going to make errors. The perfection can be done at home, the controlled practice activities. There's lots and lots of this on the internet. So they can aim for perfection in their own time. But at this point, the goal, and you can state this as your aim. My aim is to get the message across. Can you make your partner understand what's needed without being perfect? It's quite interesting to note that people who are not language teachers have more tolerance for people who make errors but get the message across than people who make no error but are very slow and tedious to listen to. So fluency without total accuracy is much preferred in communication partners than absolutely single-minded accuracy, but oh gosh, it's tedious to listen to. Yeah, everyone makes mistakes. So there's lots of debates in error correction, but in the end of the day, you know your students. Experiment a bit more, get feedback from them, ask them how they feel about your correction, ask them if they want more or less or a different style or a different approach. So we're coming towards the end of the course. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. So at the very end there will be a follow-on reading list, but I thought I'd just answer some of the frequently asked questions that come up in teacher training sessions about error correction. So the first one is about fear, really. And it does seem to be a very strong reason why people don't correct as much as they can. They don't know the grammar, they don't know what sort of error it is, they don't know how to correct. The ways forward are planning, so anticipate correct errors on planned language input. The second way is ask the student what they think the answer is. Very, very often the student has a very good idea what they want to say. They're just testing a hypothesis. Find out what peers think. Tell the student to research it and work it out for themselves. The main thing to remember is that you are the teacher because you are better at using the language than your students. So it's quite valid to say to the student, tell me what you're trying to say, and then correct, and your response can be, I would say this. Okay? Obviously it's better if you can give a technical response, but it's not absolutely necessary. So absolutely try to correct. One thing that you can do is note down errors during the lesson. After the lesson, prepare up a worksheet based on these errors. Use the AI so you know what's going wrong and start the next lesson or use them within the next lesson. So error correction can be delayed and the students love that as well. Okay. There's definitely errors. There seems to be. The research on this is mixed, but there does seem to be a progression of tenses and vocabulary, etc., that students learn and in order. So it's very, very hard to get them to use the present perfect continuous before they've started using the past simple. For example, third person S always seems to be late acquired. I think the main thing is codify the error so that you can show the student very easily, to or for or by, what sort of the error that they're making, but also don't beat up on it. If you start making it a stressor, then it becomes a big deal. Quite often, errors will right themselves as the student's greater knowledge expands. So codify, simplify your correction and keep moving. It is very tempting and we all do it. And sometimes it's quite a good idea. I mean, in a fluency activity and the student's a bit stuck and then you know that they're not going to get your explanation, your recast or whatever, just tell them. In that sense, you're doing it in order to get the activity moving. You've got a clear aim. However, in terms of the learner learning, they're very passive and therefore less likely to remember it. So where possible, try to get the learner to engage. But if it's not practical or feasible, do it. Give the answer and move on. This does happen, particularly some students who are extremely sort of needy of rules. I think this is down to management. So we come back to look it up. I'll answer your question later. Let's hold where we are now, or your question's interesting, but let's stick with where most people are at. So in this way, you need to stop the learner from interrupting the lesson with stuff that's erroneous or pulling everybody off track. So postpone the information you give them is probably the best way. Pronunciation errors. So it will depend. If you're working in a monolingual situation, you'll soon work out, German is V and W, Arabic is P and B problems, Japanese sh, ch, Chinese s, sh, ch, they have horrible problems with those. Kitchen and chicken are the same sound to Vietnamese learners, I always remembered. Demonstrate the pronunciation, show the word, show your mouth position for each sound. So we go back to codifying. If it's a VW problem, the V becomes very quickly, and students look at your mouth and they know that they've made the error again. You can use the phonemic chart, you can use minimal pairs. However, recognise that you are never going to get a student to sound like an English native speaker. Your mission is to get them to be comprehensible, not to be native speaker. Comprehensible is great. And if you think about that, in England alone, how many different accents we have, and they're all completely valid. Accents are fine. Comprehensibility is the goal. This also happens, particularly at the lower levels, and I would say that your task is communication. You want to teach the student how to communicate, and that doesn't require perfection. And also it's worth noting that anybody listening to somebody finds it much easier to listen to a student who's fluent but makes errors rather than somebody who's slow but correct. So people prefer fluency in communication rather than sort of hesitant over-correcting. So remind the student that communication is the goal, not linguistic perfection. Very few native speakers speak perfectly. We all make mistakes. Conclusion. Good or error correction is one way to increase your student customer satisfaction quickly. It's personal, it's that personal feedback, and essentially many language classes, that's what they're paying for. They can learn so much online through self-study, etc. The edge that you have is that individual feedback. Praise is great, but individual linguistic correction is the best that you can offer, and students highly value it. So practice, practice, practice. Good luck. Thank you for being with us to this point, and we wish you all the best